Welcome back everyone, and welcome to another video. And in this video we're going to learn how to make and print this 3D printable Renaissance pillar within Fusion 360 with no supports and with a mechanical and detachable locking mechanism. With that said, let's get started. Okay everyone, so to get started, you should have a blank canvas within Fusion 360. Now here on my screen, I have an image of the design, and what I want to do is just briefly go over some of the features of this, so that way we can get a better understanding as to how to model this. So let's take a look at the very simplest features of this. If we really look at this, it's just a whole bunch of basic shapes being stacked on top of each other, and then just fillets and basic movements or like shapes being formed around it, right? So let's take a look at the bottom. The bottom is just a square with cylinders, and then basically just these fillets or these cylinders added with fillets. The center here is just a giant cylinder being curved in. Now the thing we need to note here is that since it's being curved in, that means it's not parallel. It's not going at a 90-degree angle. It's actually at an inward angle where it meets in the center here, but it also gets a little bit thicker at the bottom. Very top here, it has like a goat-like head shape. So like if you ever look at a goat, it has like those horns. That's basically what it is, at least what it looks like to me. And realistically, this is just a circle with just a square. And all we're gonna do is just model the base here first, then model this section here, and then model here. And additionally, when it comes to 3D printing, if we were to model every single thing and have it as one whole body, the issue would be that we would need supports underneath these areas here where the shadows kind of meet here. So in order to make this where it's support free and easier to print and faster to print, we're going to focus on the parts that don't need supports, which is this main piece here, and then separate these two into two different pieces. So that way we have this top piece and this bottom piece. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into Fusion and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new component. Let's name this to Pillar 1. Now what we need to do is to create a total of 2 new components, and this is going to be under the Pillar 1 component. So go to New Component, name this to Bottom. Going back to our main component, create New Component. This is going to be Top. So by now you should have a total of 3 new components. You should have the new main component that we've created. You should have the bottom one, and as well as the top. Additionally, if you are on the latest version of Fusion 360, feel free to unground these components, as we will not be needing that for this. So the first component that we're going to work on is on the bottom, selecting or toggling on the bottom so we can get started with that one. So in order to get started, let's go ahead and create a new sketch. Select the bottom plane, select a center diameter or center rectangle within our sketch environment here. And let's go ahead and set the dimensions for this to 30 by 30. So right now you should have 30 by 30 for this rectangle. From here, let's press E, select that profile. This is going to be extruded up by about 10 millimeters. And now you should have a basic square, right? So from here, what we need to do is to focus on these pieces here, which is a whole bunch of cylinders with fillets on it. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and create a sketch. From the center diameter circle. The first circle that we're going to make, this is going to be 20 millimeters. Now each and every extrude that we're going to make for the newest sketches that we make, they're going to be 3 millimeters in extrude thickness. So make sure the operation is set to join. Let's create another one from the center. This one is going to be 15. So you should have one cylinder, which is 20. The next one's going to be 15. Pressing E once more, selecting that profile. This is going to be 3 again. Creating another cylinder from the top, center diameter circle. Going out, this is going to be 20. Pressing E once more. This is going to be 3, and press OK. Now what you have is basically the bottom piece here. Now, currently right now, there's another small little cylinder here, but we're not going to add it because that would add more cylinders. So we're just going to have 3 for now. So I think that should be just fine. So if we take a look at this design, it's basically just cylinders with fillets being added onto it. Now, before we focus on any features within Fusion, first we want to get down the fundamentals before we start adding stuff. That way we don't have a whole bunch of stuff in our timeline. So let's go ahead and finish this up and get the main portion, which is the bottom. So let's go ahead and create another sketch. Select the top face, center diameter circle from the origin, and this one's going to be 18 millimeters. Pressing E, this is going to be 1 millimeter, and this is going to be the start of our pillar, so that way it's going to start concaving in. Create another sketch, select that top face. This sketch is going to be 17 millimeters. And now what we have is the basic bottom design of our pillar. So now what we can focus on is the top piece, which is creating the length or the size of the pillar. So what we can do is press S on our keyboard, type in offset plane, selecting the top face here, and dragging this up by about 40 millimeters. So what this essentially does is that it allows us to set or select a profile or a face within our canvas and then create a plane which we offset, so that way we can create a new sketch on that plane instead of having to manually free draw it within the 3D environment. So you basically are creating a plane instead of drawing within our origin or sketching within our origin, we'd actually sketch up here. So go ahead and create a sketch, select the top plane. Let's go ahead and reorient to the top, select a center diameter circle, and from the origin, so make sure you select the origin, dragging this out, this is going to be 16 millimeters. Now, if you were to notice here, this bottom piece is 17 and this one is 16. Now, if you want to make it 15 millimeters, you could. It would be just a little bit concaved a bit more, but I think 17 to 16 would work just fine because that's about a millimeter of it going inwards, if that makes sense. So if we're to press S on our keyboard, type in loft, what we can do is select this bottom profile that we just made, then select the top one, and if we press OK, now we have the basic overview or look of our pillar here. So now we have the bottom pillar here. So if we take a look and compare the two, you can basically see this is what we have so far, and it pretty much now starting to look identical. We just need to focus on adding some features to this. So in order to get started and continue on with the next step, what we can do is start adding the features relevant to this design. So let's zoom in, pressing F on our keyboard, select the bottom edges of our cylinders, and let's see, let's match this up. And all I'm doing is just selecting the edges of our cylinders here. And let's go ahead and add a fillet of about 1.5. And depending on how much of a fillet you really want on this, I'd say a 1.25 should be just okay. A 1 should be fine as well. So 1.25 I think looks okay. I'm also going to add another one. So going back to within our timeline, adding another selection set. And this selection set is going to be this edge here. And this one's going to be about a 0.5. And just to compare our image, see now we kind of have that piece here. And we have that kind of opening here in the middle where it's like a shadow. And it looks good to me. So I'm going to press OK. And once I have that, good to go. Additionally, now what we want to focus on is the pillar itself and getting this architectural design that we have here. So one really easy way to do this is to use what is called tangent plane. And what that allows us to do is to create a plane that is tangent to whatever it is, whatever face that we're working on. So instead of creating, for example, an offset face, which is going to be parallel to whatever it is we're making an offset plane, which is parallel to whatever it is we are offsetting. This is actually going to be tangent, so it's going to be exactly what it is to the cylinder. So for example, if this cylinder is concaving inward, if we were to use like an offset plane, for example, and let me just show you what this looks like. And let's just say if we select it from the origin, this wouldn't really make so much sense because this plane is at a 90-degree angle while this cylinder is concaving in. So we need to make something that matches that cylinder in the way it's moving inward. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and create a tangent plane by pressing S, type in tangent plane more specifically. And what you want to do is select the cylinder face, and Fusion 360 will automatically place a plane within our cylinder here. And by default, it should be accurate. So pressing OK, And if we were to take a look, you can see now our plane here is directly matching up with our cylinder, which is exactly what we want, because without it, we won't be able to get those features. So let's go ahead and create this sketch for the piece here. So if you're to take a look here, it's basically just a rectangle with a fillet. So let's create a sketch, select this plane, and let's go ahead and create a rectangle from the center, meeting all the way down. Doesn't have to be perfect. All we're doing is just setting it up. And I'm gonna dimension this. I would say maybe a 1.5. And I'm going to go ahead and just double click on it and just move it right in the center. This is just eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And now that we have that, we can finish sketch. And this is what you should have so far. So from here, let's press S on our keyboard, type in emboss, select the profile here, select the face, which is going to be our cylinder. And now what we've done is basically emboss that profile into our piece here. So let's go ahead and finish this off, and I'll explain exactly what this looks like. So let's go ahead and select the depth to about -0.5. And let's also select the effect to deboss. So instead of emboss going out, this is going to be deboss going in. Pressing OK. And now you should have basically a long rectangle on your design. So from here, what we can do is add a fillet to each of these corners. Pressing F, type in fillet, or S, type in fillet, or pressing F on your keyboard, and just selecting these corners. And all we're doing is just filleting these corners. So it's going to be these very, very small edges here. And let's set this to 1. Let's see what that looks like. 1 is too much, 0.5, 0.6, 0.75. And there you go. So here we have this. Now that we have that, let's go ahead and create another fillet, selecting the inner ring here now, because now we have a fillet going in. And we can drag this out to, let's just say 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6. So 0.6 is where it stops, 0.5, 0.4. And what I'm possibly going to do is just see, probably going back on our timeline, probably reduce the depth of our emboss or our deboss to maybe a 0.25 instead of a 0.5. Pressing F once more, selecting the inner rings. And I'm probably going to select the outer ones as well, see if we can match them. So let's see what this yields us. So maybe reducing the size. Now you have a little bit more of a fillet, 1.5. Okay, so Fusion doesn't like these fillets for some reason. So let's go ahead. What I'm going to do is just reduce the fillet size for here, make it a little bit lighter, maybe a 0.5. Fillet once more. That way we have a better ring here, 0.5. And that looks a little bit better to me. And there you go. Now we have like that design pattern. Now, I know we went back and forth on the dimensions, but honestly, it's not really that important unless you're really going for accuracy, and you can just play around with the settings as to whatever it is you like. So I'm gonna just use 0.5 for that. And now what we can do is create a circular pattern around this. Now, one thing before I move forward is that since we use the deboss feature, basically what that does, it's basically instead of extruding a piece going out, so when you extrude, it doesn't really match the curvature of things like this. It's going to leave it at kind of like in an angle, because it's not like a deboss, where deboss basically just matches the profile here. So if we can see, so when we look at this design, our deboss directly matches with the cylinder that's being placed inward. Additionally, if we were to change the size of this cylinder, let's just say 15, this would also match accordingly within our timeline without breaking, which is really cool, because if you were to do an extrude and do this, it would look very different. Like, for example, if there's an extrude going inward here, it would look very different here than it does to the top. So I'm gonna go ahead and change that back, leave it at 16, and let's continue forward. So what we can do now is press S on our keyboard, type in circular pattern, and we can select the last few features in our timeline that directly correlate to this feature that we added here. So the axis we need to select is the Z axis. So in order to see that, we can toggle off our bottom, select the blue line here, toggle it back on. And now what we can do is just adjust the quantity to whatever it is we want. So here, let's just say, I'd say 15 maybe. So it looks like it has a lot there. So I'd say 15 looks good. Press OK. And fingers crossed Fusion does its thing, and there we go. So here we have the basic pillar of our design, fully featured, fully modeled out, and honestly, it looks pretty clean. So if we wanted to, we can also add a concrete sort of effect. So we can type in concrete or marble, whichever you prefer. So we have concrete, we have tiles here. So I think I'm gonna go with concrete tiles. And if we were to give this a quick render and see what it looks like, now we have the base or the bottom of our pillar here, which is honestly not too difficult to make, but there's just quite a few steps that we have to do within Fusion 360 in order to make this work. Now, keep in mind, there are many different ways to do this. You could use some sort of, for example, sketching a profile and then revolving it to create the bottom piece. You can create a whole bunch of cylinders like we did here and create fillets, but more or less, I'm just showing you an easy way to do it, or a way to do it without complicating it, or there's realistically many different ways to do things. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we have the bottom piece modeled, the next thing we need to do here is to model the top piece. So in order to get started with that, what we need to do is to essentially start modeling the top and get focused on what it is we need to work on, which is this top piece. Now that we have the bottom, we can focus on this and then change it to the very top here, right? And that's what we're going to be working on. But before we continue forward, we also want to save this because we know how Fusion is. Can break, so I'm gonna go ahead and name this Renaissance Pillar and press save. Now, one thing I mentioned early on in the video is that if you're going to make this into twistable parts that basically you can twist off and for it to come off without printing supports, what we need to do is to focus on the bottom first and creating that piece that allows us to do it. So what we're going to do is orient to the top and create a sketch. So let's go ahead and create a sketch. Select the top plane here, or the top face there. And what we want to do is create a center diameter circle. Now, make sure to follow along because this part does get a little tricky. From the origin, drag this out. We're gonna go ahead and make this, let's just say 12. Center diameter circle once more. From the origin, drag this out. Let's just say this is gonna be 8. So right now you should have a total of 2 lines. One is 8 and the other one is 12. From the center, it's going to create a line. This is gonna be our reference for our design. From the side here, this should be parallel to the line in the middle. So if it's not parallel, you can select the parallel constrained. And as you can see, it's going to give me an error because it's already parallel. And if it is, then you're good to go. Let's create another line once more. Make sure that line is also parallel, and you should know by seeing those parallel features. Pressing D on your keyboard, select these 2 lines, and we're going to dimension this to about 3 millimeters. From this side going out to the left, this is going to be about 3.5. Now, the reason why this on the left is 3.5 and the one on the right is 3 is because when we twist this thing off, it's going to turn in a different direction in the same way where we twist it to go in. So we need to make sure the part that's coming out needs to be larger than 3 in order for it to come out and as well as for it to fit in. So from here, now that we have the basics of our design, let's go ahead and press E on our keyboard, select this profile here, and let's extrude this to about 4 millimeters. Press join, and there you go. Going back to our sketches menu within our components, turning it back on, selecting this profile, pressing E on our keyboard. Let's go ahead and select the starting point to offset this to about 2 millimeters, and then selecting the extent to 2 object, and then selecting the top face, and that's going to match it up and basically create the piece for it to snap in. After that's done, press OK. And now you basically have this cylinder, half square looking thing. The main point here is that this matches with our design, and that is very important, right? So like if this is a cylinder, this is also matching with the curvature of the cylinder. So in a sense, they are basically matching each other. So what we need to do in order to reduce supports here is pressing S, type in chamfer, select the bottom edge and the top edge, and we can just set this up to around, let's just say 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.5, and just matching it up until it meets right in the middle. Sometimes you need to play around with the settings. You can see around 1 millimeter, this is where it matches up with our chamfer here, or our square there, right? So now that we have that, let's go ahead and create a circular pattern with this feature here, that little piece that we have here. Pressing S, type in circular pattern, selecting the last 2 features, which I think is these 2 here in our timeline, selecting the axis, This is going to be the Z axis, so you can turn off the bodies, select the Z, turn it back on, and now you should see you have two outlines of our design and one main one. And if we press OK, now you basically have like this twist and turn type of thing for our design. So this is pretty cool because now we can create the opposite effect for the top piece and then just use that in order to put it in and not use any support. So this is the really cool part. So now that we have that, we're basically almost done. The next thing we need to do here is toggle back on our top. And let's go ahead and turn off any sketches that might show, so that way we can work on this. So now that we have the bottom fully modeled, the next thing we need to do here is to model the top. So let's take another look at our top piece here. If we were to see, this is just basically a cylinder here, and then another cylinder here. It looks like it's going up as well. So this looks like we need to create one more cylinder, then two profiles, one profile a little bit smaller and one going up, just in the same way we did here. And additionally, the main piece here, which is like these horns for like a goat. So this is pretty easy. So I'll show you guys exactly how to do it. So the first thing we need to do here is make sure to toggle on the top components, create a new sketch, select this piece here, that ring, and then go ahead and create a center diameter circle, dragging this out. And let's go ahead and set this to around 18 millimeters. After that's done, let's go ahead and toggle off the bottom, press E, select this profile. So it's going to be a few profiles since we were working off of that face there. And then set this to 1 millimeter and press OK. Let's go ahead and create another sketch. Select this top face, center diameter circle. From the center, drag it out. This is going to be, let's just say 15 and maybe 16 instead. Then from here, let's go ahead and create an offset plane, pressing S, type in offset plane, dragging it up. This can be dragged up, let's just say about 12 millimeters. So that looks good. So if this is 16, this needs to be at least 17, creating a sketch on that plane. So let's go ahead and draw a center diameter circle, 17. And now what we can do is press S, type in loft, select this bottom face and this top face. And now that we have this kind of like a hat, and that's basically what it looks like. It looks like a hat. So here we have the bottom and the top. So now we can just toggle off our bottom once more and we can work on the top. So if we look, it looks like maybe the top piece is a little wider. So if we don't like the curvature of this, if you want it to be a little wider, I think I'm gonna change this to, let's just say 18 instead. Press OK, so that way it's a little wider. And we're also gonna match these horns. Now we're not gonna do these decorations here in the middle just because that would make it a little bit more complicated. But the main thing here is the just main portion, the main simplest features of this design. So what we can do to make this easier for us is this, instead of trying to offset plane and doing all this other stuff, what we can do is just work with the existing origin that we have. So for example, if we're to turn on our origin, or let's turn on the origin for this design, right? What we can use, or what we can see, is that we can create a sketch for these horns here on this face and then extrude this out on both sides, and that basically is going to make up the design. So let's go ahead and create a sketch, select the top face or the front face here, orient to the front, and now what we can do is create a center diameter circle and then create a line and just dragging it towards the middle. And all we're doing is just creating a circle with a square on it. Make sure everything is tangent to each other. So you can see here, so make sure everything is parallel and tangent. That is very important. And let's also see what else we're missing. And what we can also do is just play around with some of the dimensions here. So if you don't like how it looks, make it a little bigger. And then what we can do is press S, type in control point spline, create a total of 3 lines. So if you don't know what you're doing, or you haven't, or don't know how to see this, you can just select an edge here, drag one here, and then going out. Now that we have that, turn on our body, pressing E, select these 2 profiles, set the direction to 2 sides. The first side is going to be going out, I would say about, let's just say 9 millimeters. And the other side is going to be around 9 millimeters as well. Set the operation to join, very important. That way you have this piece at the top. Press OK. Now that you have that, you're basically almost done. So let's take a look once more. Now you have the horns, and let's go ahead and let's create an offset here so we can add some features. So this could be about -1, -1. Extrude this in, maybe -1 here. Now you could make this circular pattern here if you wanted to. You just have to sketch it out. But for now, I'm gonna just leave it as is. It looks kind of like a whistle, but it looks fine to us, right? Pressing S once more, type in mirror, selecting the last few features within our timeline, selecting the mirror plane, and the mirror plane is going to be what we used in our origin, and pressing OK. Now you should have basically the kind of general look of our pillar that we have here. So in order to remove this piece, you can just delete these two faces since we don't need them. And to make it look a little bit nicer, we can just add a fillet here at the top, move this in, and now it looks much cleaner. Additionally, you would also have to repeat this pattern here on the back side as well, since this doesn't have it, but looks good to go. And this pretty much is it. So let's turn on the bottom, the pillar, and now we have the basic look of our Renaissance pillar, which is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and add some color to this. So let's add the concrete tile, which we used. Turn that off. And if we were to give this a quick render, and there we go. There is our Renaissance pillar within Fusion 360. Pretty cool, pretty easy. There are quite a few steps to make this work, but truly this is not that difficult to do. So the main thing I want to focus on is that I also mentioned that the bottom is going to connect to the top. And as of right now, if we were to look at our design through a section analysis, you can see that this piece is extruding in, and that's going to be an issue because obviously it's not going to connect. So what we need to do here is to work on the top piece using the existing sketch that we created for the bottom. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and toggle on our top, turn off the bodies. Don't turn off the component, just turn off the bodies for the bottom, turn on the sketch, and then turn on the sketch relevant to what we used for the bottom here. So you can see it's kind of like opaque or transparent in a sense, or like the opacity is lowered, which is totally good because this is what we're going to be using. So turning off our analysis, selecting this profile here, and selecting these two, extruding that. This is going to be -4, or 4, excuse me. And that's going to cut into our design here. Now, the main reason it's 4 is because the top piece is 4, but when it comes to 3D printing, there are clearances that we also need to meet. And if we're using a 0.4 nozzle, I would say anywhere about a 0.4112 should be just fine, just because of the clearances. That's very small, where your printer should be able to create a small enough gap, but just tight enough for it to like fit in and be just snug. So we're going to add 4.12. So it's just a little bit bigger than the 4, and press cut. Now that we have that, selecting this profile, because that's the profile that we use for the chamfer, or for the piece that's going to move into it, pressing E. This is going to be 2, and press OK. Let's go ahead and add a chamfer to this so we can match this up. And this could be, let's say, 1, and press OK. Additionally, we also need to create a press pull feature here, so that way there's a little bit of a gap. So I would say -0.12, and you can see we press pulled it inward, so we're good to go. Same exact thing, pressing S, circular pattern, selecting the last few features in our timeline that are relevant to what we just did, Z axis, press OK. So we're doing once more. I think I didn't select all of them. There it is. So it's the last 4 features in our timeline. And now you have the basic overview of our thing here. So it's pretty cool. And let's also make sure, let's see if we can press pull this a little bit. It might not let us, totally okay. Just to make it a little bit bigger. But I think should be just fine. I haven't had any issues. So let's go ahead and take a quick look. So if we turn on the pillar 1, turn on the bottom faces, and use a section analysis, you can see now we have our piece here sitting directly right here, which is perfect. There's enough of a gap here, and there's enough of a gap at the top, so it should fit just fine. Let's also revolve or use another section analysis so we can take a better look from the top to the bottom, And there it is. Now you can tell you've done it right if you see there's a gap here right in the center. So let me just turn off any sketches. So if you see there's a gap right here in the middle, then you've done it right. Let's go ahead and complete this. So we can turn off the top, turn on the bottom, and let's go ahead and just press pull this in just a little bit. Let's see if we can press pull this in like 0.112. If not, I don't think it should be an issue. It's just mainly because that might be too thin or might not fit, but it should fit just fine. In this case, let's just leave it as is. I haven't had any issues since I printed it, but just in case, if you're using like an ender, you might need to make it a little bit wider or a little bit close or make the gap a little bit wider for the top piece or the bottom. But if you're using like a bamboo, shouldn't be any issue. So here we have that. Additionally, if we want to finish this off, we can use S as built joints, select the bottom, then the top, selecting the type to revolute, and we can select the very center of this to be the revoluting piece here. You can see now we have a revoluting part, and you can see the way this works, it moves to the side, bam, and then that would basically just like move down. That's the whole point of this. Additionally, one thing I also want to note is that you can see here, in this case, let's see if we can take a look. You can kind of see here that this piece is going to move to the side here. And there also needs to be a little bit of a clearance for this to fit in. So in the case that this doesn't fit, because this circle is quite small. Now on a much larger cylinder, it's not that much of an issue. But for this one here, you can see that although we've done it correctly, we matched the sides correctly, this piece is not enough of a gap for it to fit through. So in order to fix that, what we can do is just go back to our bottom, turn on a sketch, and turn on the sketch that is relevant to what we did for the piece here. So instead of a 3.5, we can make this a 4. Finish sketch. And now we have a much wider opening for our piece here. You see now here on the left-hand side, or on the right-hand side, it's much wider. So if we were to turn this around, now it should fit just fine. And that's perfect. So it looks like maybe just a little bit more. Once more. Maybe a 4.25. Looks like it's please delete and modify one of the constraints. So in this case, if it's not enough, what we can do is turn off the top, or excuse me, turn off the, or toggle the top, excuse me, turn off the bottom. And the main issue here is that it is colliding with this piece here. So we can just add like a small chamfer, pressing S, chamfer, just chamfer this in. Let's just say a 0.5. 0.5, 0.5, and maybe a 1. Should not affect the design too much. Should be just fine. Pillar. And let's toggle on the bottom so we can see. And if you can see here, if we twist this around, now we have that gap. And that's perfect because that is matching our design here. And this still allows us to snap it in place and then snap it out and pull it out. You can see that little gap there is what's allowing us to do that. So that is perfect. That is the entirety of our design here, and just making sure everything looks good. And you can basically just go around this and make the changes however you like. Now, the main reason why I'm showing you, or why you should have good, more or less, you should know how to design features within Fusion without it breaking. So for example, when we went back to the sketch and adjusted the size, nothing within Fusion broke. And that's the whole purpose when you have good design etiquette. When you do have good design etiquette, you can go back in your timeline, make changes, and the rest of the things that you do should match accordingly. So just in the same way we made the bottom piece a little bit wider, or the top a little bit wider on the chamfers, we can, that basically just make sure that matches it up for everything else. So exactly what we did within sketch here, that also reflects here at the top, which is why in the very beginning you have to have good design etiquette. But more or less, this is the entirety of this design. So let's go ahead and send this off to our slicer and see what it looks like. Okay, so here I am within Bamboo Slicer, and here is the final product. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this off by giving this a quick slice, and let's see what it looks like. So you can see it's gonna take us about an hour and a half to print, and you can see, as promised, no supports. Now there might be some support here under this edge here, but you can adjust this a little bit. or you can add a fillet here additionally, since it would make it a little bit nicer. Now the main thing here is that you really don't need supports for most of this. Now there might be a little bit of supports mainly on these under edge here, but otherwise it should be just fine. Now I currently have it modeled at, or the layer height at 0.112, so it is pretty in terms of like layer height. You can see like a lot of these layers are very tucked in very nicely. If you have a 0.2, there might be an issue here, so you can see a lot of them are going to be a little bit more transparent, but I would recommend either a 0.12 if you really want to capture those details. But you can see it turned out really nice. You can see there's a nice clean fillet, a little bit cleaner than usual, and at the very top as well. No supports for this piece here, and supports for this, none really, because everything's chamfered. The only thing that might need supports is this, but you can go ahead and add a fillet or a chamfer and it should be just fine. Aside from that, maybe even here, but you can adjust the extrude. That way it's not too extruded just far, because that's like the feature of it. But the main portion here is that you really have a final design here from start to finish that looks like a Renaissance basically pillar. So I'm gonna go ahead and print this out and show you guys the end result. Okay, so here is the final print. This is printed in Overture PLA concrete, and this came out really nicely, really well finished. And truthfully, a lot of the parts and pieces here, they are very good. I mean, realistically, this is a fantastic print and it printed well. What I really like about this is the detachable top, which allows me to detach and then reattach it. And since these are two different pieces, they don't need supports, and they were really easy to print. Even on a generic printer, your print should be just fine. If you guys want to get access to the STL files for this print, you could join the Fusion 360 for 3D printing with link in the description. All the resources from this video and as well as the step-by-step guide will be located in that group, so feel free to join the group with the link down in the description. Additionally, if you want to get access to more tools and resources, level up your skills around Fusion 360, level up your skills around 3D printing, and overall become a better designer and even a seller, feel free to join the waitlist down below for the School of 3D Printing. Currently, we have a waitlist, so as soon as the program launches, you'll be first to know and get access to those premium resources. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.